Good morning. It is Monday, June 13th, 2022, and this is DC Signal to Noise. Okay, since we last talked, the bean market has really outperformed all the other grain and oilseed markets and scored new highs in the old and new crop contracts. Crude oil futures made new contract highs, but have not crossed the level seen in front month futures at the time that Russia invaded Ukraine. U.S. gasoline prices have reached a new all-time high. The average this morning across the country, $5.01 for regular unleaded. U.S. inflation was reported at 8.6% year on year in May. And because the Nationals and the Cubs have each accumulated just 23 wins this year, let's mention the Iowa horse, huh? Mo Donegal won the 2022 Belmont Stakes. It was the third different winner in the Triple Crown races this year. One last one. Wednesday starts the Stanley Cup playoffs. Tampa Bay Lightning against the Colorado Avalanche. Jim Wiesemeyer, Pro Farmer Policy Analyst. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning. That's called grasping for a horse, Chip.
Yeah, I hear you.
Well, I just got back last evening from an excellent multi-day conference of the Cotton Warehouse Association of America and was attended, gave a good speech. G.T. Thompson, the ranking member on the House Ag Committee, had a chance to visit with him and his very nice wife, Penny, that's her actual name. And just a host of good cotton people each year. And it was at Coeur d'Alene. If you've never been at Coeur d'Alene in Idaho, you should go because it's one of the most beautiful places. I go to events, hopefully every year, but not necessarily. The sugar people have also gone there.
All right. Well, very good. I'd love to go sometime, Jim. That'd be outstanding. What did you learn? What did you learn while in Idaho?
They had excellent presentations. I will tell you that not limited to cotton. These shipment backlogs of export sales, Chip. They had transportation experts and change glitches, and they're considerably behind in shipments. And I think that that's going on in corn and soybeans as well. So I put that to being signal that some of these shipments are going to be carried over into the next marketing year.
Okay.
It's not going to be settled. So that is something to watch. It's just not sales now, as we well know, but
Right.
this year it's going to be shipments, and they are dragging.
Yeah. Okay. We'll probably talk a little bit more about that as we go on. Just a reminder to everyone that we would like you to be part of the conversation this morning. There is a comments tab somewhere on your screen. Go ahead and click on that, and I'll just address something here real quickly. We're having a bit of a technical issue with my camera this morning. I don't know why it's as dark as it is, but it kind of fades in and fades out, and it gets bright. See? And now it'll darken up on us here in just a second. Try to ignore that. We'll continue on with the conversation.
The light of day is with me anyway, Jim.
Right? That's right. Oh, jeez.
I do want to add, we had a question because we love those questions and bring them in.
Yeah.
We had a question last podcast about seed availability. And our good friend Chip, Michelle Jones, emailed me, and she said her local nutrient dealer has told her and others if we want 2023 Clearfield winter wheat seed that we need to buy it now, and they're not sure they can find it. It's apparently very short, and she said that's not wildly surprising given the winter wheat production challenges, and wheat doesn't import as much seed from other locations like corn and soybeans. Now, a seed company contact emailed me because he listened to the program, and his quote was, "Seed companies are in the business to sell seed. They are not going to run short and will produce to compensate for the risk around weather, etc. Some varieties could be short in a given year if and when that hurts that particular production geography." So that was mainly corn and soybeans, I think. So there's the response.
And Michelle is up in Montana talking about that Clearfield seed.
Yes.
So I'm sure that is a similar issue in other areas across the hard red winter wheat production areas. There's just no question about it. Okay, as long as we're addressing questions from listeners, Dawson, who I'm not exactly sure where Dawson is at right now, but I met him when he was at Iowa State University, had a question about the damage to the grain export facility in Ukraine, Jim. How extensive was that? I mean, did it completely disable, destroy? What did it do?
I don't know about completely, but our sources are indicating it was a major hit, Chip. And this is why the concern is there that of the around 20 million tons of grain sitting in the facilities, and the capacity is filled, with new crop coming on. It is a growing problem.
Yeah. Has there been any progress made? And I call it progress. I'm not exactly sure if that's what I should call it, but has there been any progress made on finding a path for some of that Ukrainian grain to get out and into the export channels?
A lot of attempts. It was signal, but mainly noise. Is what I conclude. And you basically, no one can and should trust what Putin says
Right.
about this and other things.
Right. Yeah, it's as we talked about when this was initially bandied about, that it was strange that the conversation was happening between Russia and Turkey. Where was Ukraine in the conversation? Well,
Yeah.
they weren't.
Yes.
Ukraine was not in it.
And
So
it's going to be limited. I hope I'm wrong, but I think what I'm hearing, this is going to be a continued problem. You've got the World Trade Organization, remember that, WTO?
yep.
They're
Yep.
having a meeting this week to talk about export bans, food security, etc. And there was a phrase that G.T. Thompson used. He says he loves to call rural America essential America. He keeps using that phrase, and I think it's great to use it that way. So he
Interesting.
said this is, again, a learning experience of national and food security is coming into play big time, and that will play a role in the next farm bill.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Eh, that's part of framing the conversation for that next farm bill.
It is, and
Yeah.
they had a first of the really major farm bill hearings on farm programs, Chip, and crop insurance in the House last week, and I think it's a significant signal for the years ahead. There, it looks like they'll try it as a pilot project, and margin insurance for grains. They're looking at the dairy program,
Yep.
which has been very successful,
Yeah.
not totally,
Been popular.
popular when they went to margin. Now,
Yeah.
it could get quite expensive, but they're going to look at it, and the best way to do that is a pilot program, and that was suggested by Dr. Joe Outlaw at Texas A&M. And watch that one because it could have some legs on it.
Okay. Over the weekend, I think there's several items that I could have selected for the one item to talk about from the weekend, but the comments from Mohammed El Arian, who is the chief economic advisor at Alliance,
Yes.
on Face the Nation over the weekend, and from Larry Summers.
Yes.
About where we are headed with this economy, Jim. It's more than a little concerning at this point.
Yes, it is. And he said he was flustered as to earlier in the whole process of why the Fed wasn't seeing what others were seeing. And we've discussed that before. And now you have the 2-year and the 10-year Treasury yield briefly inverting this morning. And Chip, we followed this over the years. That's an initial signal of a possible recession. So they're beginning to flash warnings there. And we're going to see a lot more information come out this Wednesday when the FOMC, Federal Open Market Committee, issues their statement. But just as important are going to be the updated Fed projections And also, Chairman Jerome J. Powell will have what we call a press event.
Right.
And his statements, how many times are they going to do this 50 basis point? Will this increase the odds of a 75, basis points? You've got some in the investment house saying that could be the case at least one time in the coming months. And you've got the equity markets just in a tailspin now. So if they haven't made the lows, they're making them any day now. It's going to be a bloodbath today with the S&P 500 in bear market territory again.
Yeah. The meeting on Wednesday, is there any indication that maybe we would see a 75 or even a full point?
Well, there's always possibility, but they like to signal well in
They
advance.
sure do.
So almost too much, I think, and too many
Right.
Fed people speak too much. I don't see it, Chip, but I think he could lay the groundwork for that. That's what's going to be curious to see.
Every time you lay the groundwork for something like this, you take away the effectiveness of the actual event.
Yeah.
If you want to feel the impact of a full point increase in interest rates, you do it this week.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you won't feel it. If he comes out of this meeting and says, "Hey, you know what? We're considering a full point next," you've lost the effectiveness of it. You've got to be able. You got to have some of that surprise factor in there, or it's relatively ineffective.
If we had Paul Volcker back in, that's
God.
what he would do, Chip.
Yes.
He would go probably 1%, and he would have been there. He just would have increased it and gotten it over with.
That's the FOMC meeting. I mean, there are numerous issues that could compete for the most important issue of the week ahead. But I think the FOMC meeting might be right at the top of the list, Jim.
It is. I think it is. That's especially in the financial markets areas for sure. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I did want to point out. I've had a lot of emails from Pro Farmer members, and this is our ground truth that we've relied on over the years that in many times have been spot on, and it's helped us. And they're signaling big payments of emergency relief program, the old WIP Plus, Chip, have been made. And USDA has not made an official initial comment on that, but I think when they do, it'll be a big one for their first report.
Payment limits getting hit?
They are, and that was a discussion in the cotton meeting amongst some of the producers there. And I know USDA, I was told there, USDA is looking at the situation. So that could be clarified as well in the coming weeks. And that would be a good sign for a number of the larger producers who produce so much of our crops.
Yeah. Okay. Both chambers are in this week. We could go through it in chronological order on some of the things that I want to be watching for, but I'm going to take something from Friday, this coming Friday, and move it all the way to the top of the discussion. And that is the deadline for filing comments with the Securities and Exchange Commission on the proposal that would require publicly traded companies to track and disclose GHG emissions in their supply chain. This is something that Zippy Duvall at the American Farm Bureau Federation and others, but we had Zippy on to talk about it on AgriTalk. Very, very vocal in opposition to this one.
Yes, and you go to any major commodity group meeting now, which I do, and they bring this up big time, Chip. So I think you will see some modifications on, especially on the timeline to report some of the potential impacts of the ag and small business sector. This goes into the unfunded mandates that's hurt us in the past. So hopefully some more information will modify what they want to do. But we have a very aggressive in Gensler, the SEC chairman.
Okay. Talking about gasoline prices, crude oil prices, I mentioned at the start that we're seeing new contract highs in crude oil futures. We're not back above that 130 level that we saw when Russia invaded Ukraine. Question from Eric here. How about Biden's trip to Saudi and the crude issue.
Well, yeah, and they're going to announce it any day this week. The Wall Street Journal reported that, but we actually knew that, before, where he's going over. Initially, he was going to go over this month, but I think they've rescheduled it till sometime in July. I think, and that's been a dichotomy for the White House, especially Biden, because he went in being very negative on Saudi Arabia on a human rights perspective. But now with this run up in energy prices, I think he's already got the initial signal from Saudi Arabia that they said they're going to increase production somewhat. We're going to have to check the capacity of a number of other OPEC countries, Chip. But this is the initial uh, I don't know whether I should say payoff, but for their initial increase in production statement. And I think you'll see Saudi Arabia increase, if they can, increase additional production in the months ahead.
Okay. All right. Let's go on to a couple of things that are going to be considered very early this week. And let's start with the gun law.
That's a major development in this town. Now, the House passed a bill last week, but the Senate, you're going to have at least 10 Republicans sign off on it. Now, we don't have the final details, and we've seen in the past when there's been a bipartisan agreement on a very controversial topic, it can fall apart. So we need to see the language, Chip. I always say that. But right now, they have 10 Republicans, and the minority leader, Mitch McConnell from Kentucky, has given his blessing. I mean, he wasn't one of those 10, but his co-leadership in the Republican sector in the Senate are on that list. So there's going to be things, and it will include funding at the school level. And in the mental health area, which Republicans think is the real, some of the real factors for the increases in violence, Chip.
Well, there's some Democrats that fit into that concern too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't want to underestimate the significance of this, because you have to go back to the the Clinton administration for any gun reform, I should say, legislation. So it is
honestly any serious conversation.
Yes,
you've got to go back to Clinton.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The item, the details matter so much on this.
Oh, no doubt about it.
I mean, and I don't know the details. The thing that concerns me when I look at it's a piece of the proposal or the legislation that that probably has the greatest potential to be a very effective. I'm talking about the red flag.
Yes.
Proposal here. That has the potential to really be an effective way of preventing some of these tragedies. At the same time, that is the issue that is most potential for misuse.
Yes, and further background checks at an earlier age too. They're going to prohibit certain
down to the local police.
Absolutely. So they're beginning to make sense, to be blunt, and so we'll see if it happens. But it won't stop all. It won't stop all. No. I think that gets back to other really heady issues, such as family stuff, problems in family.
That's where they're going to try. That's where the red flag warning is expected to have some kind of an impact, but it can also be it can also be Jim, what if you say something that Eric doesn't like, and Eric says, you know what, I want to put a red flag warning on Jim Wiesemeyer.
Yeah. That gets into the ties. That's why this is controversial.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's going to be
That's where the language becomes whether or not it makes it in the final
right.
bill. And then on the other side, now the House is very much more aggressive, Chip. Is some of the chatter in Washington is that will enough of the very aggressive House members in the Democratic Party will they revolt and not pass what the Senate does? So that's why we're not there yet. But I think the biggest hurdle has always been getting it out of the Senate.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Um, let's see. Where do I want to go to next? The House today is expected to approve the Senate passed Ocean Shipping Reform Act.
Yes, and when I talked with GT Thompson, he told me he much preferred the House approach, but the Senate was not going to clear that, so it will pass the Senate this week, Chip, and it'll be on the way to Biden's desk. And he mentioned the need for this in his trip late last week to Los Angeles, where he just fired all guns at the shippers for gouging. But frankly, his own people could not verify that there was price gouging that they could claim. And a European Competition Committee last week basically said the same thing. So, but there are very needed things in there with those empty carriers. And see, this is where we like to connect dots. That's a significant part of the backup of some of the containers
Yeah.
in the cotton industry that I heard about for the last few days, and other commodities. So this is an important one. I think it's ag friendly because it's going to get at some of the barriers that we've seen in the lack of getting our good farm products uh, out of the country
Yeah.
on the way.
Is this going to uh, is this going to overturn the Jones Act?
No,
Okay.
no, no. And we had Senator Moran on, remember, in AgriTalk, and he says, "Oh, it'll be talked about,"
Yeah.
but you're not going to get it out of the Senate because of the shipbuilding states, Mississippi and other areas. Again, I could be wrong, but I don't think that step is going to be taken.
Right.
Now you can always have a waiver if you can prove, and that's happened before. So that's what the U.S. flag vessel people say. If it's an emergency, go, seek a waiver. It's
Yeah.
been done before, but I don't expect major reform of the Jones Act, not in
Okay.
this year, going into the November 8th elections. No way.
Right. Right. Before we get too far away from our conversation about gun reform, Gary had a comment out there that I'll just throw out there real quick. If energy policy is any indication, gun reform will be a mess and an overreach.
Yeah.
That's the concern, Gary. Yep. Yep. Um, okay. From Carl, this goes back to the ERP payments. ERP implementation, do you think there are fixes in the works for the 75% AGI, adjusted gross income rules?
Yes, I can say that on pretty good authority on some of the people I talked with in Coeur d'Alene, both from USDA and the industry, and that's about as far as I can go without getting in trouble. But this is where our good friend Paul Neiffer,
Yeah.
he wrote a memo to the House Ag Committee staff. And that's making the rounds. And good old Paul, he nailed it. He put the facts there. And he said, you've got to give the accountants the ability to do what they really can do in other areas, basis the 2017 tax law changes. Now that broke while you were out, Chip, but plain old speaking and expert Paul Neiffer did a great service I think, for agriculture by pointing out
Wow.
some of the facts. Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yes.
Well, we like to hang around smart people, Jim.
Absolutely. I do want to point out something I forgot to mention at the cotton. Of course, Texas people were there, from Lubbock and elsewhere, and we had a hail. They had a hail event around the area, and it was a larger area than I think the trade realizes, to such an effect that it will be, I think, eventually a market sensitive factor in those acres are lost. So I think the acres involved are
Abandonment now.
abandonment. Yes.
Mhm.
And so I would watch that in the months ahead for verification from
Yeah.
USDA. But those cotton people have been proven very accurate to me over the years.
Yeah. Southeast Nebraska had a bad one too. Uh, it, I don't know if I. It sounds like in many cases the corn crop was probably the growing point was still underground on a lot of that corn. So hopefully it'll come back, but it looked devastating to me.
Melody asked, she's been hearing concerns from a European acquaintance over
Okay.
American sugar beet harvest. Any validity? I'm going to a sugar meeting in the next few weeks, but I'll get on the phone and we will check on that one as well.
Right. Good deal. The Ag and Biofuels, the House Rules Committee meets this afternoon to prepare the Lower Food and Fuel Cost Act for floor debate. Package includes 7 bills, Jim, related to agriculture.
Yes.
Now, some of them look like I thought some of these issues had already been decided.
Well, not totally.
Okay.
On the year-round E15,
Yeah.
this would allow it. I guess give them cover, if you will. Just allow it. It doesn't mandate it. So that's probably an optic bill there. There's the controversial investigation, I think.
The special investigator's
Special
office.
investigator.
Yep.
And then you'll have
for the meat packers, for packers and stockyards is what
yes.
that refers to.
Now in the Senate next week, they're going to take up the Grassley bill. Okay, certain percentages have to be cash sales, but this is a grab all bill, Chip, and it's something to watch.
Yeah. WOTUS has been having some roundtables and trying to find some clarity in how this rule is going to be defined.
Yes, but we're really waiting for the Supreme Court ruling, Chip, on WOTUS. Now, Michael Regan, the EPA administrator, has said they're still going to move on because he thinks what they eventually do on WOTUS by the end of this year will be complementary to what the Supreme Court does. I'm not quite sure how he can say that at this particular time. Now, today on Pro Farmer, I noted this: the EPA is seeking to maintain water's protection, and they're saying the Supreme Court should uphold the Clean Water Act protections for wetlands that aren't directly connected to large bodies of water. Now, that can be interpreted many different ways, Chip, because it was before. And they said at least 3 Biden administration rulemakings hinge on the outcome of this case. So that's why the Supreme Court is really going to determine the major components of whatever we get under the new WOTUS, Waters of the U.S. rule. And we have another roundtable, this with second one actually in the arid Southwest. So they're doing their due diligence. I will give them that. And we finally got the announcement, Chip, of the RFS, and Regan did deliver for the renewable fuels industry in most areas, Chip. That he kept it at a hard 15 billion gallons for corn-based ethanol. And on those waivers as well. So I will say his credibility is renewed.
Yeah, I started vacation the day before those announcements came out, and usually when I go on vacation, I try to go on vacation. I really do.
I don't blame you.
And this one, I was with my wife, and I did a little traveling around, and she made sure that I stayed away from work. There's no question about it. But I did make some time last Friday to make sure that the announcements were out and to try to get some perspective on it. And Jim, you made it really easy to get an understanding of what was announced when it was. So,
Thank you. And
yeah.
the only time I can totally relax is on a cruise where there's more bars per square feet
Yeah.
anywhere in the US.
Well, okay. Well, I did hit 2 distilleries.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
And
I'm
for
just saying.
those people in Idaho, I don't know whether you've had huckleberry beer, and they have huckleberry pancakes and huckleberry this. I love huckleberry berries now. And I mean, it was the best. It doesn't sound good for a wheat beer, Hefeweizen, but they put huckleberry. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was the sweetest wheat beer I've ever had. And let's just say I partook of it.
Love it, love it, love it. Okay, a couple of other things real quick. The Republican Congress preview, I I mean, it's pretty presumptuous, but it looks like the writing is on the wall. They're going to be previewing a potential Republican Congress this week.
Yes, and I won't be able to go to it, but I've got a couple people who will be there, so I want to, get
Okay.
their report. And at the Cotton, Warehouse Association of America meeting, our good friend David Wasserman from the Cook Political Report was there, so he
Okay.
gave an update, and he had a specific estimate. Because I told him when I went on, whatever Dave says in the House, I want to add 5, and whatever he says in the Senate, I want to add at least 1, maybe 2, and people
Yeah.
laughed. He had a specific point estimate of 29 net gain of 29 Republican seats. So they only need 5. Some people say 7, but Dave keeps saying 5. So I'll go with what Dave says.
Okay.
And he said it could grow. It could grow because all the stars are in alignment, especially in the House, Chip, and
Okay.
that's what they're gearing up for.
There's one more that I want to mention before we wrap up. There is a climate there's a House Ag Committee hearing on Wednesday. Title of it is The Role of Climate Research in Supporting Agricultural Resiliency. Okay, the reason that I'm bringing this one up specifically is because it's kind of got a strange feeling to me. You know how these things go. Not a lot of attention is going to be paid to this hearing leading up to it, but then it's going to happen, and then there are going to be things said and conclusions drawn that need a dose of logic and a dose of science, and there's going to have to walk back some misdirected progress
Yeah,
that is going to be concluded from this hearing. Watch this one. I think it's going to be important.
we will, and we'll report on it next week again. But I want us to have a bottom line where usually I feel quite comfortable when I'm on the opposite side of the general consensus on policy. And on this one, I am. So I'm watching it. And I still think the Democrats have one more big bill before the November 8th elections. And that's the combined social spending and portions of the green energy bill that they want. Now, agriculture shouldn't necessarily be negative because they could have some positive things in that because it'll be scaled back, but in particular it could literally fuel, if you will, an incentive payment for sustainable aviation fuel.
Okay.
Now, we've discussed that before, but
Yeah.
why am I a bit more positive? In the language that I've seen so far, Chip, they have an extension of some of the Obamacare provisions that are set to expire next January. I think that's one of the secrets of analyzing this bill because the Democrats do not want to see some key provisions of Obamacare expire because they know the Republicans won't extend them if and when they get in. So that's what I'm going for,
Okay.
up at least my odds of 60% or so, that we're still going to get another budget reconciliation bill that will need no Republican votes, that will include some major provisions that will set the language and the tone to phase in some of the aspects that Ag Secretary Tom Vilsack says could be the next revenue stream for
Yeah.
farmers. So
Yeah.
that's why this is a biggie, Chip.
Yeah, the
that
climate
we're
smart
watching for.
agriculture. Yeah.
Yes, we're watching.
Okay. All right, very good. Now, with that said, and with the thunder and lightning starting to happen around outside the broadcast bunker here, I'll finish it up with this comment from Ed. He said that he flew over Minnesota a week ago from La Crosse, Wisconsin to Minneapolis at 2,600 foot and saw a lot of replant going on from hard rains, and also lots of erosion in the field. So good observation there, Ed. Thank you so much for listening. Come back and listen this morning. Let's start with this morning. We've got Machinery Pete, and we're going to be talking about the WOTUS field hearings with NCBA this morning as well. Hey, have a great week, everybody. Keep watching for those signals.